Well,
I'm audible?
yeah.
Okay. May I start?
Yes, please.
A very good morning to one and all. I, Dr. Dipakshi Joshi, on behalf of Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumar University, Nainital,
अरे
welcome
हूँ
you
तो तुम साइट पे तो देखो, प्राइवेट चैट में सबसे पहले तो मैं जुड़े हूँ.
to an international webinar on the very relevant and current topic, that is WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global perspective. Health is of paramount importance. It is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being. The World Health Organization was founded in 1948 with an ambitious objective, that is, the attainment by all people of the highest possible level of health. Its constitution defined 22 wide ranging functions, of which the first was to act as the directing and coordinating authority on international health work. The urgency of many global health problems, like the recent COVID 19, suggests the need for a WHO that can more effectively navigate the new challenges of global health. And for that purpose, now we are having this virtual platform to meet you all and to get enlightened by the thoughts from legal luminaries of international reputation on this very relevant and timely topic, WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global perspective. As you all know, that today we have with us Honorable Justice Peter Mohan Perez, sir, Honorable the former Chief Justice of Sri Lanka, as the chief speaker of today's webinar. He has very kindly consented to be the chief speaker in this international webinar. And our guest speaker is Professor Preeti Saxena ma'am, Director, Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, School of Legal Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. The patron in chief of this webinar is Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kumaon University, Nainital, His Excellency Professor M.K. Joshi, sir. The advisors of today's webinar are Professor A.K. Pant, sir, Dean and Head, Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, Nainital, and Professor D.K. Bhatt, sir, former Dean, Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, Nainital. The organizing director of this international webinar is Professor S.D. Sharma, sir, Director, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Law Institute, Nainital. And now I humbly request Professor A.K. Pant, sir, to welcome all the distinguished dignitaries and participants from around the globe on this international webinar. Professor A.K. Pant, sir, please.
शुरू कर दो. शुरू कर दीजिए सर.
Professor A.K. Pant, sir, I request you to please start.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Namaste and very good morning to all of you. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Am I audible? Dipakshi?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. Yes, sir, you are audible.
Dipakshi?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Sir, you are audible. Sir, go ahead.
Namaste
and very good morning to all of you. I take this privilege Dipakshi, I am audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Sir, no problem, sir. It's okay.
Dipakshi,
Yes, sir,
hello.
you are audible. Sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Namaste and very good morning to all of you. I take this privilege to welcome all the delegates and participants in
I think there is some technical problems to connect Professor A.K. Pant, sir.
magnitude. He will be delivering keynote address for today's webinar. I welcome you, sir, from the core of my heart. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Kumar University, Nainital. It is only under his dynamic leadership, after his assuming the office just a month ago, that this event could take the shape. I also extend my warm welcome you, sir. We have another speaker, Professor Preeti Saxena, Director, Center of Postgraduate Legal Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. I extend my very pleasant welcome to her. I also welcome my senior colleague, Professor S.G. Sharma, Director, Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Professor D.K. Bhatt, former Dean, Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, SSJ Campus, Almora, Professor J.S. Bisht, my junior colleagues, students, all the participants from India and abroad, and Mr. Raveen Bisht for his technical support. The theme of today's webinar is WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global perspective. The constitution of WHO states that the enjoyment of highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic, or social condition. However, WHO has done tremendous work in the area of public health, but apart from current this COVID-19 controversy, its functioning has been questionable in the past also. For example, in fixing standards for hypertensive indicators, diabetic indicators, and other lifestyle diseases as well. This is the high time to inquire into the role of WHO. This webinar aims at understanding the role of WHO in future to come. As we all are eagerly waiting to welcome our invited guest speaker, Honorable Justice Mohan Piris, for his enlightening address on the various aspects of today's theme. So, I should not take much time. I wish the webinar to be of much meaning and a great success. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay safe. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving a perfect start to this program. And now I humbly invite Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor M.K. Joshi, sir, to kindly bless us by sharing his views on this international webinar. You have always been our constant pillar of strength. Your words of wisdom have always enlightened us and have strengthened our steps. Professor M.K. Joshi, sir, please.
Namaskar to everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Today's keynote speaker, Honorable Justice Peter Mohan Maitri Paris, retired Chief Justice of Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, Professor Preeti Saxena, Director, Center of Postgraduate Legal Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow, speakers for today's webinar, Professor S.D. Sarma ji, Director, Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital, organizing director of this particular webinar, Professor D.K. Bhatt, the former Dean, Professor A.K. Pant, present Dean and Head of the Department, Kumaon University, Mr. Ravindra S. Bish, from Chanakya Law College, all the members of organizing committee of this particular international webinar, and dear participants from all over the globe. First of all, on behalf of the Kumaon University, I welcome you all in this significant event, international webinar on WHO's role vis-a-vis global with public health, a global health perspective, which is organized by Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital. I extend a very special welcome to all our participants, our keynote speaker, Honorable Justice Peter Mohan, retired Chief Justice of Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, for agreeing to address this important webinar. I also welcome all the participants present in this webinar organized by our university. The theme of this webinar, WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global health perspective, is very relevant in today's context. I'm confident that the valuable ideas shared by dignitaries will be useful for new challenges and give a clear insight on the topic. As we all are aware of, the World Health Organization, WHO, was founded in 1948, and the main objective is the attainment by all people of the highest possible of health. WHO has assumed a vital role in this area. It has been providing assistance to countries in developing their own health information systems. Though it is discussed many times that WHO must engage in the global health arena with a stronger hold on its role in integrating, coordinating, and convening the public health in global perspective. Currently, questions are being raised on the role of WHO in regard with COVID-19. Still, we find WHO as an important pillar of support to public health all over the globe. With its 6 regional offices and 150 country offices, WHO works closely with the government around the world. It provides accurate and easy to understand advice and information to all the people through situation reports from briefing, work closely with all the social medias like Instagram, LinkedIn, chatbots, WhatsApp, and Viber platforms. Yesterday, we all had this Environment Day. We celebrated Environment Day. And now, because of this lockdown procedure adopted by most of the countries in the world, COVID-19 has an positive impact also on environment. It improved our air quality, our water quality, wildlife, and vegetation. With these words, once again, I welcome you all in this international webinar and extend my best wishes for success. I congratulate Professor S.D. Sharma, Director, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Law Institute, and the entire team for organizing this webinar. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Your presence in gentle words has always been a source of inspiration for us. Dean William R. Inge once said, "The aim of education is the knowledge, not of facts, but of values." On occasions like this, we get the opportunities to test our knowledge and understanding. We look forward to get an exposure about what the best of brains thinks about the current topic. So, without taking much of your time, I humbly request Professor S.D. Sharma Sir, Director Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital, to throw some light on the theme of today's webinar. Sir, please.
Respected Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kumaon University, Professor N.K. Joshi Sahab, Honorable Retired Chief Justice of Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, Paris Mohan Ji, and the second speaker, Professor Preeti Saxena, Director of CPGLS, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University. My dear friend, Dean Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, Professor A.K. Pant, my another colleague, senior of the faculty, Professor D.K. Bharti, Professor of the Law Faculty, Professor J.S. Best, Professor A.K. Naveen, and other teachers, esteemed teachers of the Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, and the Technical Director, Mr. Ravindra Singh Bistji, the persons appearing or the persons who are participating, one of the most eminent professor from the University of Columbia, a senior professor having the good award, civilian award of the Sri Lanka, the person who have Jiva Narela have the good experience of teaching international law in the field of the legal areas. The professors of various universities in the Sri Lanka, Nepal, the professors of Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Argentina, and the judicial officers from the High Court of the Nepal and the judicial district officers from various corners of India, including the Amroha district court and the Uttarakhand court. Other persons as advocate, students of national universities, and every corner in India from starts from the that Chennai and up to the Goj, the Himalayan range, that is the Assam, and from Kutch to the another corner of the area, including the Uttarakhand, Himachal, and near about 1,500 participants are participating in this international webinar. The students of National Law Universities, they have registered themselves to participate and to get the good information relating to the role of the World Health Organization. Other persons, the social media persons and the persons who are working in the non-governmental organization, they have also registered under this international webinar to get the good information from our speaker. Therefore, the theme of today, as you know, it starts from the 1945 when there was a San Francisco conference, and it has decided there should be the one organization relating to care and to prevent the disease and to lay down the norms and to do some research work in the areas of health. It has started in the 1945 conference. In San Francisco conference, it has decided, and later on, the United Nations Charter has prepared under Article 57. It has given the provision that there should be the specialized agencies, like this is divided into the two parts. The part one says that the United Nations shall be establish a World Health Organization according to the provision of the Article 63 Nations Charter. And there is the another that is the clause 2, which says that this will be called the specialized agency, and the 63 says that there will be the Economic and Social Council shall regulate and enter into the agreement. Therefore, I would like to quote, because there is some the internet problem perhaps, and I would like to quote the very successful officer of the WHO and the United Nations. Why such type of organization the organizing the international webinar development community. At the same, there is another to the development of this type of the international webinar, seminar, and the role of the World Health Organization. Because of this problem, the role to monitor, lay down, and to have the world community of the health in the global society. Number two, research in the area of the relating to the aspect to the disease, and there are two kinds of disease. One is the disease which have no relationship with the those areas where it can be said the communicable disease, and to give the nomenclature like the COVID-19 has been given by the WHO, and to lay down relating to the food of business and some of this area of the earth. And I would like to quote again the one of the quotation, the famous quotation relating to this aspect, the which has said by the Lord, execute led to the society which will be the dictatorship. Therefore, such type of system which is going on relating to the protection of the health, I would like to say that if we say that sammaddhasvam saha o manasam jagritam, go together, adopt dialogue, go together, adopt dialogue, you will get knowledge and progress. At the same time, the aspect if he says that for every the working style, WHO is playing a very good role about the system and about the society, and therefore it will be proper to see the present aspect of the COVID-19 that आंधियां दीपक को जलना सिखाती हैं, पतझड़ों के बाद कलियां भी आती हैं, हौसला मत हारो राह के मुसाफिर, बीमारी भी इंसान को ठीक होना सिखाती हैं. I hope that our speakers will express the about the aspect of the today event. Therefore, thank you very much to all the participants who has participated from the various corners of the global society, and especially to the students of the National Law University and the universities, other universities. They are very much interested to listen our main issues. I have the full confidence that this seminar will success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for giving valuable insights on the topic. Now, I deem it a great honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Preeti Saxena Ma'am, Director, Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow, an eminent scholar and academician, author of various books and research papers in the areas of human rights, constitutional law, right to information, IPR, criminal law, and many more. She has delivered lectures to the officials of Higher Judicial Services, Bhopal, and officials of public administration as well. She remained expert in various academic committees, including NAC and UGC, and prepared the new syllabi to be implemented in 2020. She also participated as a fellow in the Leadership for Academician program at University of Virginia, United States. It is indeed a proud moment for all of us, and we are delighted to have you among us, ma'am. We thank you for your kind presence here. Now, I humbly request to ma'am to share her views on the topic of this international webinar. Professor Preeti Saxena, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Dipakshi. It's a proud privilege for me too to share my views on this international webinar on WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global perspective. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers who have given me this platform to share my views on this very burning topic in today's context, because as we all know, that we are all in the grip of the COVID-19. The first attack, which was, we can say, recognized in December 19 from China. So after that, continuously, we are exposed to this COVID-19. Now, in that respect, what would be the role of WHO? WHO, that is the main leader in reference to the public health at international level. So what should be the role of WHO and what is the global perspective? So I would like to break this topic in two aspects or in two issues. First, as relating to the WHO's role, its creation and its origin, and what was the law prior to the WHO that came into existence. And the second issue will be related to the globalization or the impact of globalization on the public health or global health law. So on these two topics, and after these two topics discussion, I would be given two open questions to the participants also to think about as to what we should do in this scenario. And for going through this topic, I have consulted three works. Mainly, there are so many works on this particular subject, but I have consulted three works mainly besides others, and those work are of first is of 1922. That is the work of J.J. Middleton. He was a doctor in the public health department in Ontario, who wrote a paper which is relating to the value of quarantine as a communicable disease. That was published in Public Health Journal in 1922. The second work which I have consulted for this talk, that is a book written by Lawrence O. Gostin, and this work was published in 2014. And the third one is of 2017. Again, that is one of the article published in a book that is Unprepared. And the title of the work, which is written by Andrew Lakoff, that is Global Health in the Time of Emergency. So first of all, as we all know that global pandemic has a great impact worldwide, and almost all the countries in the world, they are in the clutches of the COVID-19. Right from 11th March, the date when it was declared a pandemic by the WHO, this unprecedented number of the countries, they are now in the clutches of the pandemic, that is COVID-19. So because of this COVID-19 pandemic, various countries, they have adopted the system of emergency. Now, in some of the countries, the emergency directly have been imposed, and some of the countries where emergency has not been formally imposed, but otherwise the conditions have been made so that we are all in the lockdown since 25th March, where we see in India, 25th March till 31st May, we were all in the complete lockdown. It was only that we are now come out from this lockdown from 1st June in phases. That is not absolutely put together, but we see that we are now not in the clutch of that lockdown, and the things have been started because of the 2 points. First, we want life, we want profit. That is, business is also one of the aspect. When we'll be talking about the globalization, then naturally I talk about this life versus profit, life versus business, life versus hunger also. So it's not a fight against the life, it's a fight against the hunger also. So how to correlate these two things in this aspect of globalization or global perspective of the health? We have to see that what is the global health at number one, or what is the public health. So far as the global health law is concerned, it basically or primarily rests within the domain of the public international law. So the subjects and the sources of the international law, as we all know, have been traditionally narrowly defined to give the priority to the state's sovereignty. And the public international law mainly focuses on the conduct and the relations among the states, and including the rights and obligations of the states only. But though states remain the basic part or basic subject or major subject of the international law, however, international organizations and through the development of the human rights law, we see that individuals are also now considered the subject of the international law. So the scope of the global health law is conventionally limited to few WHO negotiated health treaties, and perhaps the most we can say aptly labeled as the international health law. Now, so far as the international health law is concerned, it is originating with the WHO. And WHO is the body of law which designed explicitly to promote the human rights. And the World Health Organization is the global health leader. We all know it is endowed with a progressive health power and the constitution and international legitimacy. So there is no substitute, we can say, for the WHO, World Health Organization. It is considered to be one of the only agency which has to look after the public health at global level. So because it has no other substitute, and it is not comparable normative powers and the influences also. So the WHO is a specialized United Nations agency with an expansive mandate and unequal expertise, because it's not only the United Nations that it is supporting, but it is being supported financially as well as expertise also from some international government NGOs, as well as from the other parties, private parties also. So it has having various unequal expertise in reference to its medical and health issues. So almost every country now, the position is that almost every country is a member of this WHO, which provides the potential for democratic accountability and as well as the global impact. Now, the origin is concerned regarding WHO, then we see back to the international health institutions that preceded it. It can be traced from the first International Sanitary Conference that was held in France, Paris in 1851. So we see that the law relating to the global health that was started somewhere in 1377, when the General Council enacted certain rules regarding the quarantine system. So at that time, it was not quarantine, it was Trentino. For 30 days, isolation of the person who is sick, who is infected, from those persons who were not sick, who were not infected from any disease. So that was the outcome of the outbreak of plague at the European countries at that time. So since then, anyhow, we are having this international system, and particularly we see the International Sanitary Conference that was first initiated in 1851 in Paris. So after that, 14 conferences were convened since 1851 to 1938. And in those conferences, the conventions and regulations were all made, and the first sanitary convention was come into picture in 1892. So this 1892 can be said to be the predecessor of the WHO's IHR, that is International Health Regulation. Now, so far as the creation of WHO is concerned, as the organizing director also put some light on this creation of the WHO, we all know that United Nations was established in the response of the horror of the World War II. And one of its primary function was the protection of global health. So in 1945, the United Nations Conference on the International Organization in San Francisco unanimously approved the creation of a specified health agency. And February 15th, it was 1946, that the newly constituted United Nations Economic and Social Council called for an international conference to consider how to create an agency. So to create an agency, this was convened, and a meeting on 19th June 1946, wherein we see that 61 delegates of various countries who were at that time the member of this United Nations also, so they all convened the meeting of International Health Conference, and they come out with the World Health of this World Health Organization's constitution, and which is said to be the Bible of the World Health Organization, or the Magna Carta of the World Health Organization. So at the first, we can say specialized UN agency is WHO, and the constitution of the WHO entered into force on April 7th, 1948. And when this required ratification of 26 countries was there, so that date was the date when this WHO constitution came into existence. And this 7th April 1948, when this constitution came into force of WHO, that is now being celebrated and commemorated as the World Health Day also. So we see that the WHO constitution expresses the universal aspiration that health is basic to happiness, harmonious relations, and security of all the persons. And in that respect, we see that WHO's concept of 1951, that the Assembly had adopted the International Sanitary Regulations as the WHO Regulations number 2. It was renamed in 1969, and now it is known as the International Health Regulation. So without going into detail the structure as to how the WHO works through its various agencies, whether it be World Health Assembly, Executive Board, its regional offices, and its secretariat. So in all these systems that work, and the WHO Constitution's first article, that is very important for the purpose of understanding the role of WHO, is that its bold mission, which is given under Article 1 of the Constitution of WHO, as well as the preamble also defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of the disease or infirmity. And the attainment of health by all the persons is of the highest possible level. That is the main preamble or the focus of the WHO, and thereby this WHO is working towards making this mission a reality, a truth, and working on that mission, that the public health has to be maintained anyhow. So the preamble places the human rights as a central theme, affirming that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of the health is one of the fundamental rights of the human being, and that is also given under Article 12 of the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. If you see that Article 12, that provides that the right to health is one of the human rights, and that is also one of the important human right, and the preamble also goes with that main theme of the public health as a right to health. So achieving the objective needs leadership, and in the realm of the global health, the WHO is the only agency with the legitimacy to provide that leadership, because this WHO Constitution Article 2, that establishes the WHO as the premier global health leader, stating that the agency should act as the directing and coordinating authority on the international health work. So working on the close collaboration with the United Nations agencies and national health ministries and professional organizations. This is all there. And basically, we see that how it is making an impact on the public health globally. So the very important articles of the World Health Organization Constitution, that is Article 23 and Article 62. Article 23 speaks about that the WHO Constitution grants the WHO, that is, it's one of the working organ, World Health Agency Assembly, that the authority to make the recommendations to the members. So first of all, it will make the recommendations to the member. And Article 62, that is more important, is that which requires that all the states globally, they have to report annually on the action taken to comply with the recommendations as to what they are doing at their domestic level and what type of the diseases and how they are taking care of those diseases. So these are the two articles 23 and 62 which are very, very important with respect to the working of the WHO and showing its leadership towards the public health. So another point that is relating to the regulations through which it is working. So WHO's, it is a quasi-legislative powers under Article 21 of the Constitution of WHO, and it has a broad range of the health topics. So first is regarding the sanitation, quarantine, and other interventions to prevent the international spread of disease. The second is relating to the nomenclature of the diseases as to what shall be the nomenclature of a particular disease, the causes of death, the public health practices. The third area where which it has to work, that is the standard for the diagnostic procedures for international use. And finally, the standards relating to the safety, purity, and we can say potency of the biological and pharmaceutical products, and which includes also, as I have given the example that I will be discussing at the last point, globalization, the impact, the profit and the economy and the business, etc., relating to the health issues, that is moving an international commerce, as well as the advertising and labeling the products. So under this power of Article 21, there are two regulations which have been adopted by the WHO. The first is known as the nomenclature regulations, and Article 2 specifically empowers the WHO to establish and revise the international nomenclature of various diseases. And the second regulation that is related to this international regulation for the health, IHR, so that was adopted in 1951, as it was earlier named as the International Sanitary Regulations or International Sanitary Conventions, and that was consisting of the 6 quarantable diseases: cholera, plague, epidemic, louse-borne typhus, relapsing fever, and yellow fever. So these were the 6 diseases which were there in 1951. And that particular regulation of International Sanitary Regulation of 1951, that was further, we can say, adopted by the Assembly in 1969. It was revised, consolidated, and this ISR was renamed as IHR. And there have been certain amendments in this IHR. It was in 1973, then in 1981. And till 2007, we are seeing that certain amendments are being made in this international health regulation. So following the outbreak of SARS and the avian influenza that threats in the early 2000, the Assembly completely revised this IHR in 2005 and in 2007 also, as I told you. Now the question is that how this WHO is working towards the eradication of various diseases to the health system. So we all have witnessed that the WHO has launched major campaigns against the skirts of the time, that includes the tuberculosis, malaria, and smallpox. But ultimately, we see that the campaign proved to be unsuccessful. Unsuccessful why? It was due to the high drug resistance rates, it was low effectiveness of the insecticides, and the problem with the planning and the logistics, as well as the resources. Because basically, if we talk about the resources, then we have to talk about the funding to this agency, which is a part or a special agency of the United Nations. So where from the money is coming, that is also one of the very important and challenging aspects. Another declaration of the WHO, that is related to the Health for All campaign or declaration of Alma Mater, that was of 1978. And then we see that there was a global program on AIDS that was launched in somewhere in 1986, and that grew into the largest program in the WHO's history, we see. But that program was also, we can say, added with the United Nations program also. It was not solely WHO's program, but that was of a great success of 1986 AIDS program. And then in 1988, we see that WHO launched the program of Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and that was again not the exclusively through WHO, but it was a combined effort of Rotary International as well as CDC and UNICEF. So all these three, they have done this. So we see that in the early 21st century, now we are witnessing this organization is battling against the newly emerging diseases. These are known as the SARS, pandemic influenzas, and the novel coronavirus MERS. So WHO identified SARS as global health threat in 2003, raising the agency's profile with highly visible updates and travel advisories, the launch of the new framework for the global cooperation and pandemic disease threats, and the IHR. So before the emergence of the SARS, the WHO was tackling this avian influenza also, H5N1, with the first human case reported in Hong Kong in 1997, perhaps. Yeah, it was in 1997. So while the WHO was triumphed diplomatically with the successful negotiation of the this preparedness of the influenza pandemic framework and the revised IHR, its leadership was considered to be in operation of these norms, and that has been put on the test at the time of the MERS, that is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, novel coronavirus that is called. And it was first reported in Saudi Arabia in 2012. And MERS has not demonstrated, we can say, sustained human-to-human transmission, but it was having a very high fatality rate among the laboratory confirmed cases. So where we find that IHR, International Health Regulation, that is having one of the provision under which the global communication and transparency during disease events are the fundamental principles. Under this IHR, WHO members must notify and share the information regarding health emergency of international concern, and this novel coronavirus is clearly a reportable item under the IHR. But here we see that the government has not informed, Saudi Arabia government has not informed the WHO, and WHO has not taken any step, and it could not because of certain, we can say, sanction behind that. So these are the concerns which reminiscent of the China also, which received the failure, promptly reports the SARS, and which provided an impetus, we can say, to the revision of various IHR regulations, and that has posed one of the issue of virus sovereignty also, that who owns MERS. So for this, the work of Lorenzo Gostin, that is Global Health Law of 2014, that is very important, which has highly focusing on this viral sovereignty. which speaks that in 2007, when Indonesia claimed the sovereignty over influenza, that is H5N1 samples under the international law Convention on the Biological Diversity, known as the CBD, which recognizes that countries have sovereign control on biological resources. So it is found there with their territories. So Saudi Arabia was not formally claiming the sovereignty over Mars samples, but it has insisted on its legal right to control the sharing of the virus. And we see that there are so many virus outbreaks also, like H1N1 in 2009, Ebola in 2014, SARS, plague, Spanish flu, MERS, and then this is influenza A of H5N1. And very latestly, we have seen that the Zika, ZIKA virus in Brazil in 2016. So all these, we can say, virus outbreaks, including this COVID-19, has put a great, we can say, criticism over this WHO's role on, or its leadership on the public health or maintaining the public health. So how to cope with this leadership of the WHO with that of the public health? So we have to consider the second issue of this global health aspect, that is the impact of globalization or global health perspective. So we all know that globalization can be understood as a process which is characterized by the changes in the range of social spheres, which includes the economic, political, technological, cultural, as well as environmental areas. And globalization is restructuring the human societies. It is, we can say, ushering new patterns of the health and diseases. Every time we are witnessing new types of the health, new characteristics in the health issues, and it is reshaping the determinants of the health of the individual concerned. So the globalization of trade and investment, and travel and migration, information and communication, all these had a culture and a different lifestyle in obscuring the traditional boundaries of the national as well as international health scenario. So globalization has brought enormous opportunities for prosperity as well as the serious risk to the health and safety. But we see that the travel and migration, the environmental pollution, international trade, and information dissemination can rapidly spread the diseases and even amplify exponentially, we see, from one end to the another end of the globe, and to one part to the other part. So this is true whether the disease is caused by a pathogen or a behavior, the environment, or a dangerous activity. We have to see that the health hazards have to be seen in that respect. So not taking much time, I'm just giving to my suggestion points, and I'll be leading with the open question for the participants as well as to the other speakers. So the determinants of the health, whether it be through pathogens, air, food, water, lifestyle choices, it do not originate solely with the national borders. So health threats inevitably spread to the neighboring countries, regions, and other continents. So it is for this reason that the law and policy must be transnational, extending beyond sovereign nations. And secondly, the infectious diseases transcends borders and affect both rich and poor countries, with far-reaching consequences for national health system, for health security. I have been listening one of the webinar where it has been termed as the secular virus. This COVID has been termed as a secular virus. No religion, no caste, no age, no area, but it has to be inflicted as an infectious disease. So this is no longer a way to truly, we can say, ensure the public health than through cooperation and communal action. And finally, my questions, open-ended question is that where are we today? In between the viro terrorism and virus sovereignty. When we are talking about the virus sovereignty, we see that IHR provisions are there, but how far we are accepting that in respect to the public international law, where every state is performing its sovereignty and it is not paying heed towards this virus sovereignty. Then the second is WHO really do lead to maintain the public health. And thirdly, the life versus profit, because we are fighting against the hunger also. And as what we have seen that COVID-19 cases are increasing now with an unparalleled speed. States have unlocked the direction with certain directions, this lockdown, and every individual has to take its own care. So in that respect, where we are, what we have to do on this issue, we have to discuss globally also as well as domestically, and in every state what we have to do. And with these open-ended questions, I electronically muting myself to hear the most awaited talk of Honorable Justice Mohan Paris. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving your valuable insight on the topic. It has given us a new perspective to adopt while discussing on the role of WHO with reference to public health. Now it is a proud moment for me to introduce our chief speaker of this international webinar, Honorable Justice Mohan Pere sir. Honorable, the former Chief Justice of Sri Lanka, it is very difficult to quote his illustrious career just in a few minutes, but I'll try my level best to do so. Justice Mohan Pere sir has served as the former Chief Justice of Sri Lanka. He was educated at St. Joseph's College, Colombo and Royal College, Colombo. He played cricket for both the schools. After his legal education from Sri Lanka Law College, he was called to the bar on 19 June 1975 and became a solicitor of courts of England and Wales in 1978. After qualifying, he worked for senior lawyers Daya Pereira and DRP Gunatileke. He joined the Attorney General's Department in 1981 as a state counsel, later becoming a senior state counsel. During this time, he was trained at the National Institute of Trial Advocacy of the Harvard Law School, at the Center for Police and Criminal Justice Studies of the Jesus College, Cambridge, and at George Washington's University. He left the Attorney General's Department in 1996 and joined the unofficial bar, thereby started private practice in the areas of administrative law, commercial law, land law, fundamental rights, and industrial law. He was appointed Attorney General in 2008, Senior Legal Officer to the Cabinet in 2011, and became Chairman of Sealand Bank in 2012. He represented Sri Lanka in the United Nations Committee Against Torture in 2011. He was nominated to be the Chief Justice by President Mahinda Rajapaksa. He served as Chief Justice of Sri Lanka from January 2013 to January 2015. As a judge of a Supreme Court, his judgments range into a variety of subjects which are in Sanskrit called Sabyasachi, that is, who can shoot by both the hands with equal finish. Sir, we feel fortunate and honored to have you here as our chief speaker in today's international webinar. I'm sure your juristic thoughts on this subject will benefit on our participants of this international webinar. We all are looking forward to a very fruitful and informative session by Honorable Justice Peter Mohan Pere sir. I humbly request sir to share his views on this international webinar. Honorable Justice Mohan Pere sir, please.
Hello. Hello. Professor Saxena, can you hear me? Hello. 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 Dr. Joshi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You can. Okay. Right. Would it be my would the floor be mine now? Can I speak a few words or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Saxena, for inviting me to participate at this webinar today. I was doing some reading yesterday to be able to make these few comments. And I found the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Ghebreyesus, in one of his observations to the Group for Infectious Diseases response, amongst other things, had this to say. He said that in the context of the pandemic, this is solidarity in action. And that is why this new initiative is so important. And he said, as observed by the persons who work with me, we need to break the cycle of panic and neglect. Now more than ever, countries must come together to exchange lessons learned and to offer mutual support. He went on to say that this initiative is an example of the multilateral cooperation between nations that is crucial as we take on this pandemic and build more resilient health systems going forward. He said, as he had said many times, it is not only through solidarity and mutual support that we will beat COVID-19 and be better prepared for other threats in the future. And more importantly, he finally said that in doing this, we can move forward to achieve universal health and the health targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. And he went on to explain the role and the spirit in which he said it. And I intend throwing up some ideas in the spirit of those words. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that all countries which are members of the United Nations may become members of the WHO by accepting its constitution. Other countries may be admitted as members when the applications have been approved by a simple majority vote of the World Health Assembly. So there are altogether, we have members of the WHO grouped according to regional distribution, and we have 194 member states at the moment. Historically, the World Health Assembly is the decision-making body of the WHO. It is attended by delegations from all WHO member states, and focuses on a specific health agenda prepared by the executive board. Now, the main functions of the WHO Assembly are to determine the policies of the organization. I thought it might be relevant to just remember all this before we embark on deeper examination of the role of the WHO. It can appoint its Director General, supervise financial policies, and review and approve the proposed programs as cleared in the budget. So the Health Assembly is annually, as we know, annually held in Geneva in Switzerland. Now, the 21st century global health policy, we will all agree, requires effective global action in the face of globalization of multiple activities inclusive of human disease. The new global health scenario therefore contains several diverse elements that include a number of important stakeholders and requiring greater coordination of effort, a greater identity of the priorities, and a proper appropriation of finance. Now, undoubtedly, the World Health Organization plays an essential role in the global governance of health and disease, and by virtue of its global functions of establishing, monitoring, and enforcing international norms and standards, and coordinating multiple stakeholders towards a common goal that will be decided by the World Health Organization. Now, the global health regime, you will agree, requires the WHO's supervisory oversight and effective implementation of the WHO's core global functions as set out in its constitution to ensure better effectiveness of all players in the global health sectors. You will appreciate that ensuring this objective is no easy task. Any moves by member states to withdraw financial support would surely hamper its activities in a very substantial manner, and in my view, would have a crippling effect. Now, the process of globalization offers opportunities and challenges for the health of humankind. The prospects for the improvement of health are no doubt enhanced by the dissemination of knowledge with regard to medical and public health knowledge, medical technology, and technology across perhaps the planet. Now, this policy can be executed by the sharing, we all agree, of best practices, health promotion, and preventive strategies, and the availability of modern medical treatment. Now, the multiplier effect of all this is that all countries benefit from international norms and standards and by sustained global advocacy that supports human health. We all agree that outside the health sector, the benefits of globalization range from progress on gender empowerment on the one hand and human rights at the other, and perhaps through the enhanced prospects for trade, information technology, and economic growth. Now, another result, in my view, of globalization has been undoubtedly the accelerated spread of infectious diseases. You cannot separate, you cannot ignore that, as evidenced by the rapid outbreak of COVID-19, for example, or its pre-runner SARS, acute respiratory syndrome. The worsening health inequalities between and within countries, coupled with marketing of unhealthy consumption patterns of food products. So, the primary challenge with 21st century globalization, you will agree, is to address the global inequalities and externalities in terms of not only health, but other economic and social factors as well. We will all agree that enhancing the standard of health, addressing inequalities in health and externalities requires effective global cooperation on health that requires a global health function beyond what one nation state or a few of them getting together can offer. In other words, it's not something that one state or a group of states can actually offer the whole world. So what am I saying? I'm saying global functions can therefore be distinguished from national or subnational functions, in that these functions are beyond, because these functions are beyond the capacity of individual states, whether we like it or not. These are norms and standards, global actions, professional management, financial resource transfers, scientific research capacity, and leadership are not something that one state alone can offer. You will therefore appreciate that international health actors or stakeholders have different roles in relation to these global functions. Now, global health functions can also be distinguished as actions taken to promote global public health goods, measures that are also beyond the reach of individual governments and independent groups, but that benefit all countries, even at the country level. Now, examples of such functions range from, you will recall, from the World Health Organization, the World Health Day, focus perhaps on mental health as a global health priority, to WHO's promotion of international ethics and human rights through international legal instruments, and to WHO's leadership in developing global norms and standards, such as the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and the WHO's international, perhaps, sanitary regulations. So you will therefore see, in the first few decades following the creation of the United Nations and the WHO, historically, there were a few major international players with the political or financial capacity to influence global policy. For example, the Rockefeller Foundation, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and only in the last 2 decades, the World Bank have in the past heavily influenced global health priorities for research, policy, and investment. Now, in the process of an increasingly globalizing world, we see the birth of new international health frameworks, one that is no longer dominated by a few organizations, that consists of numerous global health actors, who is now, the WHO today is joined by many other partners, some with a primarily financial investment, others with mixed finance and policy operational functions. So therefore, you will also see, my dear friends, that today health debates are no longer behind clandestine closed doors. It's no secret they have moved out of what someone described as the cloistered health departments of our ministries. The WHO is now regularly part of international groupings and other multilateral meetings. So the World Economic Forum has sponsored deliberations about health issues ranging from a range of things, from HIV/AIDS, SARS, MERS, COVID, and other infectious diseases, and vaccines to obesity and tobacco control. So you will see that the United Nations Security Council has addressed, for example, HIV/AIDS, and the private and non-profit making sectors have developed as a force in international health. As we see relatively new players, like, for example, the Global Fund for AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, and so on, and the pharmaceutical companies that play very important roles. And you will see well over 50 private-public partnerships have been established to address infectious diseases or micronutrient deficiencies. Some, like the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi, have multi-billion-dollar budgets. Now, how does a single partner do this? International non-governmental organizations, including Medicine Sans Frontiers, Oxfam, CARE, now work in disaster relief and health emergencies and contribute to policy development on issues like access to essential medicines. So therefore, my dear friends, global health has benefited greatly from these new funds, these new initiatives, and new players. Now, this pluralism, of course, has had another effect. And what is that? The effect is that it has resulted in a loss of multilateral cooperation of international health agencies and an increasingly fragmented, uncoordinated, ad hoc, and as someone said, incongruent global health agendas, creating virtually a vacuum in the regulatory oversight or supervision at the highest level. A very sad situation. Be that as it may, we see that within this multilateral environment, notwithstanding its turbulence, WHO has maintained its unique coordinating functions as derived from its constitution. It is perhaps the only agency with the authority to develop and implement international health norms and standards and facilitate ongoing dialogue among member states on health priorities. You will also see that the benefits of cooperative national action on global health issues, although plenty, could however be hampered by a shift in WHO's budgetary allocations and policy priorities. So much so it will go away towards operational work at the country level. So you will therefore appreciate, my dear friends, that this trend will have the impact on the future of global health governance and certainly the very future of WHO, and that is something that we should take very careful note of. Now, just to say a little word about the constitution of the WHO, the work of the WHO is set out in its constitution, which has 82 articles, which divides its principal functions in 3 categories. Firstly, the normative functions. Secondly, directing and coordinating functions. And thirdly, research and technical cooperation, including the eradication of disease and the dealing with emergencies such as the pandemic that we are experiencing presently. So it is a matter of record that over the last perhaps 60 years also, the WHO has gone through a number of mechanisms in prioritizing different aspects of these categories over others, and its effectiveness, right? And its effectiveness in doing so has been the subject of debate, such as with regard to the WHO's management, its effectiveness, its policy choices, headquarter regional negotiations, and power struggles, and its allegedly weak operational capacity. Now, those are things that have been debated time and again. A project commissioned by the WHO analyzed, now I can tell you, it's a matter of record that a project commissioned by the WHO analyzed the institution's effectiveness in implementing its core functions. There was a soul-searching operation. Then we also see that WHO's executive board held a special meeting to review the constitution, recommending rewriting WHO's core functions. So there you are. There is room for improvement. And we saw in the late, perhaps just before the turn of the century, a group of international health scholars and practitioners gathered in New York for a retreat, enhancing the performance of international health institutions, to examine whether the institutional structure in international health was sufficient for a 21st century of global health interdependence. Perhaps something like that might be the need of the day. So the upshot of all this was that governments convened in Geneva in May of 2009, if I'm right, to decide on future budgets. Now, their decisions did have a significant impact on the future of the WHO. It was an opportunity to prioritize core functions, to decide whether WHO could reduce its global normative work in favor of becoming more operational in country, or perhaps not. So in the coming years, we have witnessed tensions arising within WHO about budget shifts, concerns about the future budgetary impact on many global activities, inadequacy, surveillance norms, disease classification, and the enumeration and research by senior staff. All these questions are questions that will loom large in the times to come. The most recent biennium reports have seen a shift in expenditure patterns across the WHO's 3 core functions, with more resources being earmarked for work in countries and regions. We see great emphasis on increasing capacity and managerial skills at both the country and the regional level, which is required to ensure greater transparency, greater accountability, and more efficient use of resources. So therefore, notwithstanding the emerging agreement that a number of global health issues require distinctly global health solutions, especially in the areas of global surveillance, norms, advocacy, coordination of new global players, and international health law, for example. The thinking, the ethos at WHO is that it should start thinking of a move perhaps in a different direction. The WHO's Commission on Social Determinants of Health may be a noteworthy exception to this trend. And it did highlight several key policy changes that should take place. Now, it is also well known that the antiretroviral medicines extend and improve the prospect for longevity and quality of life among patients. Particularly, now this was in the context of the SARS, the avian flu and the SARS epidemic, and the ethical principles of equity with specific emphasis on the people of South Africa and its women. However, the initiative represented a significant shift away from WHO's broad-based directive. Now, the constitution of the WHO, it might be worth remembering, enables the WHO to act in the field to address urgent epidemics like COVID, like SARS, like Ebola, and includes support for the eradication of those pandemics. The emergency clause has been resorted to under the Constitution to justify shifts in staff and funds as the need arises. So there you are. The WHO's Constitution identifies core functions such as epidemiological and statistical services, control and the eradication of communicable diseases, and establishes international nomenclatures and classifications of diseases and causes of death as essential to a World Health Information System. So you see, the work, the scope of work is wide, and it is something perhaps laudable with great difficulty, although carried out with great difficulty. So as a result, the WHO has assumed a vital role, in my view, in this area, and has been involved in technical assistance to countries in developing their own health systems and their information systems. So the WHO, the trend at WHO in the last several years, however, suggests a shift in priorities, evidenced also by the emergence of other entities in academia, such as perhaps the US government looking to fill a void left by WHO. And of course, today we have other problems with the United States. So therefore, what is the result? The WHO's budgetary process, initiated by WHO administration and approved annually by members of the World Health Assembly, delineates WHO's priority areas in each year. Fifth, it is a matter of record that 51% of the budget, for instance, was allocated to health interventions for areas ranging from HIV/AIDS to mental health and substance abuse, including epidemic alerts and response measures. Secondly, budgetary changes reflected a shift in resources from headquarters to the regions. The second largest budgetary allocation of 22% of the budget, the records show, for example, was for effective support for member states, including WHO's co-presence in countries. So one cannot complain that there has not been a shift of attitude. The WHO's Commission on Social Determinants of Health provides a noteworthy exception to the generality of its working. The CSDH, or the Commission on Social Determinants on Health, convene practitioners and academics to discuss existing knowledge on the social determinants of health and to raise societal debate and advance policies to reduce health inequalities between and within countries. So in this particular way, the CSDH satisfied WHO's agenda-setting role by recognizing the social determinants of health as a priority issue for international collaboration and state action. And WHO's role as reviewing and synthesizing and disseminating public health and social scientific information on a priority basis. Finally, the WHO has decided to engage, as we all know, in the global health arena with a stronger hold on its role in integrating, coordinating, and convening the global health agenda. We know that. In the past, strong WHO leadership has helped shape a number of critical global health pathways, including advocating the importance of health in trade debates, human rights context, public-private partnerships, treaty revisions, and reinterpretations, such as in the example, a classic example is the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, the TRIPS agreements. And in convening UN partners under the umbrella of ECOSOC, the United Nations Economic and Social Council, to develop a UN-wide policy, for example, on tobacco. So such leadership has entailed bringing together technical experts in relevant areas such as law, economics, and trade. My dear friends, in conclusion, we can identify some areas where there is a need for strong WHO involvement in governance, no doubt. One future area of global governance, as an academic puts it, is for WHO centers on that WHO focuses its efforts to converge on major trade issues concerning medicine. One such example, the academic says, is such as the Kyoto-style medical treaty, which encourages countries to sign on to invest a percentage of their gross domestic product in medical innovation and enables countries to trade credits with other countries for investment in a manner similar to that designated in the Kyoto Protocol to control environmental emissions. You will remember the Kyoto Protocol. It's something that we can take a cue from. So the WHO can play a critical role in agenda setting, for example, in treaty content, consensus building, and ultimately we would have the ratification of member states related to these treaties. So it is my respectful view that no other international organization has had the normative or technical capacity or the legitimacy, perhaps, to steer the success of efforts to address distinctly global health issues, such as finding treatment for neglected diseases and much-needed drugs in developing countries, while at the same time addressing concerns over intellectual property protection as a means to incentivize innovative research and development. A second major area of global governance for WHO involves WHO's role as an umbrella health agency, coordinating international legal and non-legal activities of different organizations. In this case, the international health field can learn more from international experience in lawmaking in biotechnology. For example, the adoption of conflicting legal standards on intellectual property by organizations with overlapping legal jurisdictions. and the international environment arena, in which the absence of an overarching agency has led to counterproductive and inconsistent results. In this capacity, it is my view that the WHO will fill a void in global health, leadership, in efforts to promote more integrated and effective collective decisions in global health. A third major area of global governance for the WHO perhaps involves continuing reform and update existing global regulations for infectious disease control, such as the International Health Regulations. Now, it is my view that such work is consistent with the general agreement that improving global health in the 21st century will require multilateral coordination and cooperation among states through both international legal and non-legal documents, instruments, and protocols, and with a major role for the World Health Organization as the convener, the coordinator, and channel for codifying future health. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, it is my view that progress on perhaps the WHO's unfinished agendas regarding health as an academic observed requires emphasizing its uniquely global functions. So it is necessary, therefore, to decide what priority should be given on WHO's core functions and mandate. The effectiveness, in my view, of the global health community in achieving global health, perhaps, is something in the hands of the WHO, until, of course, we find something better. I hope these few thoughts have given you sufficient material to continue this discourse in the course of this webinar. And may I thank Professor Saxena again for giving me these few minutes during which I could have expressed a few views that might be of use. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for enlightening us and paving our way to understand the role of WHO in its relationship with member countries and the responsibility of the government to take measures to improvise the health of their citizens. So there are certain questions from the participants. So may I ask? Sir.
Professor, I'm unable to, the voices are not very clear. I wonder whether it can be written on a piece of paper and probably held up so that I can read it, or all of us could probably read any.
Okay.
The voice is it's garbled actually.
Actually, one of the participants has asked, like withdrawal of fund by USA and increase of same by China, whether impacts on global health has always taken care by WHO. What diplomacy has arrived by such steps, sir? Sir, am I audible? May I write the question on the private chat? Okay.
Not clear.
Not clear.
I cannot actually hear the question clearly.
Is it visible, sir?
स्क्रीन पर खाली यही ले आइए, सबको हटा के स्क्रीन पर इसी को ले आइए.
Yeah, only the paper. I think there's a technical problem.
मैडम से पूछ लो, मैडम से, दीपाक्षी मैडम से पूछ लो.
Yes, sir. Yes. I think there's a technical problem with our chief speaker's connectivity. So I'm closing this program, and now I invite my colleague, Dr. Suresh Chandra Pandey, member of the organizing committee, Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Nainital, to propose vote of thanks on behalf of the entire team of Kumaon University, Nainital, Dr. Suresh Chandra Pandey.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to propose vote of thanks. It is my great privilege to propose a vote of thanks at this international webinar on the topic WHO's role vis-a-vis public health, a global perspective, organized by Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital. On behalf of Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, organizing committee, and my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers and participants gracing this international webinar with their presence.
Hello.
First of all, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, His Excellency Professor N.K. Joshi sir, who is presiding this international webinar. Without his blessings and inspiration, this international webinar could not be organized. Thank you very much, sir, for having faith on us and your kind permission to organize this international webinar. Thank you, sir, for your blessings. Thank you, sir, for sparing the time despite having onerous reservations. Thank you so much. After that, I convey my deep sense of regard, gratitude, appreciation, and thanks to our Chief Guest Speaker, Honorable Justice Peter Mohan Maitri Peri sir, Honorable the former Chief Justice of Sri Lanka, who had graciously accepted our invitation for gracing the international webinar with his presence and sharing with us his vision on the subject. I am very fortunate to listen the views of Honorable Justice Peter Mohan Maitri Peri sir. He has explored all the aspects of the topic. We express our deep sense of gratitude to you, sir, for sharing your insightful, informative, and comprehensive thoughts. Honorable sir, you have raised the standard of this international webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I also like to thank Dr. P.T. Saxena ma'am, who is guest of honor of this international webinar, and also the Director of Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, School of Legal Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. I thank you, ma'am, for your scholarly, lucid, comprehensive, and insightful views on topics of this international webinar. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I also like to thank to the advisors of this international webinar, Professor A.K. Pant sir, Dean and Head, Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, and Senior Professor D.K. Bhatt sir, former Dean, Faculty of Law, Kumaon University, for blessing this program with their gracious presence and sharing their views on the subject. Thank you so much, sir. I also like to thank Dr. S.D. Sharma, sir, who is organizing director of this international webinar and also the director of Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital, for organizing this international webinar on such an important topic which is need of the hour. Thank you so much, sir, for giving the opportunity of being part of this international webinar. Thank you so much, sir. I also like to thank Mr. Ravin Singh Bish, sir, Director, Chanakya Law College, Rudrapur, who is Director of the Technical Support Team of this international webinar, for providing necessary technological support to conduct this webinar. Thank you so much, sir. I also thank to my senior at Dr. Rajendra Prasad Law Institute, Kumaon University, Nainital, Dr. Dipakshi Joshi ma'am, who is member of the organizing committee of this international webinar. Thank you so much, ma'am. I thank to the whole organizing team to make this program a success. On behalf of organizing committee, I convey my hearty thanks to all the participants from India and abroad. I extend special thanks to Professor Jeevan Irilia, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Justice Jive Jha, High Court of Nepal, and other dignitaries and participants. I consider that you the most motivating and inspiring source behind the success of this international webinar. Thank you so much.